I'm recording. Request video from Kiwi Dan. My thoughts on what's going on in Hong Kong. And man, it's so complex that I'm going to do it mainly off the cuff. I opened up a couple tabs here, but I'll just give you what I know. So it's important to look at what's going on there in the context of history going back hundreds of years, like seriously. But the recent things that kicked it off actually are interesting. So, as you know, or may not know, I'm in Taiwan, which is in constant conflict with China. And I'll give some history to put that in perspective. But something that happened here is there was a guy from Hong Kong that murdered a Taiwanese woman, I believe, fled to Hong Kong, and there was no whatever, like, I can read the word, I don't say it much, but there was no thing in place for them to extradite him to Taiwan between Hong Kong and Taiwan. So Taiwan was working with the Hong Kong government to get something set up so they could bring that guy back here and prosecute him, put him in jail, whatever. In the process of this, then the Hong Kong, which I don't know a lot about present Hong Kong politics, but the bill that they put forth, I believe, would have allowed extradition to Taiwan and also extradition to China. And Taiwan didn't want any part of that, in that Taiwan doesn't see themselves as a part of China. That was one problem. And the other problem was that if this bill went through with allowing people to get extradited or whatever to China, China would, this is what people are saying, and it's probably true, would be able to use that to take people who are like political dissidents, people who are like anti-China, who are in Hong Kong, whatever, make them disappear to China, where once they're in China, the rule of law changes dramatically from if you're in Hong Kong. So that is where the protests in Hong Kong started. Now, as far as what's going on there, and me talking about 100 years of history, it's interesting to say the least. And I've been thinking a lot about modern democracy and Western powers, U.S., Europe, etc., in what's going on now, and the broader thing that goes on historically. So, kind of from the outside looking in with Western eyes or whatever eyes, people kind of look at China as being evil or the bad guy, and Hong Kong as being the good guy because it's democratic and the West loves democracy. And you kind of got this David versus Goliath thing going on where, China's trying to impose their will on Hong Kong in subtle and not so subtle ways. So this extradition bill was a not so subtle way. People are, going against it, and you have this conflict going on, which looks like a conflict from an authoritarian state, which is China, against this democratic state, which is Hong Kong. Now, when you get into the larger political history, and this is an article I've read before, but I'll put the link in there because it's worth reading, and it shocked me when I found out about it. So, and I'm no expert on this either, but there was this thing called the Opium Wars that happened in China. And the Opium Wars, what it basically was is, this isn't modern China. This is the China under the empire rule, the rule of, like, not modern day, what we consider modern day China. China was kind of similar to now, was producing a lot of stuff for the world, for Europe or whatever, and taking all of Europe's money. But then they didn't have anything that they needed to buy from Europe. So they're selling to Europe, don't need anything to buy, just making a bunch of money. And there's this huge trade deficit between Europe, the UK or whatever, and China. So what they do is they smuggle drugs into China and get people hooked on drugs. So then people are buying drugs to like, this is just what happened. And an interesting side note is our president, the U.S. president, our president. I don't think you're American with Kiwi Dan, but the one of the Roosevelt, like his family made a ton of money during the opium, like it was drug money basically. So as a part of the as a part of one of the treaties of one of the opium wars, they stopped. They signed over Hong Kong to the UK, to the British. So Hong Kong was a part of the Qing or one of the one of the empires, as a part of a treaty to stop the Opium War or whatever. They gave it to Hong Kong on some like 99-year lease, some 100-year lease. So Hong Kong has been a part of the British Empire all the way up until like 1997, where they got handed back over to China. So what you had in Hong Kong was this, they had their system of government was based on the British system of government. So it's democratic and whatever for 100 years or whatever. And all of a sudden it gets handed over to China. Now, one interesting, so Hong Kong was, part of UK, then it becomes back to China, and there's, I believe they were supposed to get 50 years of running on their own system, and then in maybe 2047 it's supposed to get handed over fully running by China. And China has been slowly trying to subvert things to, influence Hong Kong. So that's some of the background of Hong Kong being connected to China. Now, something else about Hong Kong is that since 1997, like China's just been blowing up over the last, over these decades. So at one point in time, Hong Kong's GDP would have represented a quarter of all of China's GDP. So Hong Kong was like just making all this money, super wealthy, and it gave them, while they had that legal autonomy, it also gave them, like, they were making a bunch of money, so, hands off. And it all, like, Hong Kong's also, I guess, this region where you can, as foreign governments can, like, kind of set up in Hong Kong, or foreign companies can set up in Hong Kong and kind of get access to China without being in China. So it's just kind of this interesting zone. But that might have been in like 92, 93, 94 when Hong Kong was a quarter of China's GDP. But now Hong Kong only represents like 2% of China's GDP. So they don't kind of have that financial sway. And basically what's going on is you're seeing a clash of a lot of different things. You're seeing a clash of democracy versus the authoritarian government of China. You're seeing, like, this, it was really, the China, what do I call it? I want to talk about face. Like, there's this thing about it looks bad to China having Hong Kong act crazy when Hong Kong is supposed to be a part of China. And in China's minds, Taiwan is supposed to be a part of China. And the reason Taiwan is supposed to be a part of China, if you don't know this, is basically Taiwan was the ruling party, the KMT was the ruling party of China during China's civil war. That what was once the ruling party of China fled to Taiwan, and then the Communist Party took over China. But then you had this other part of China who was on Taiwan, and actually Taiwan was recognized as China for a long time by the world, and then that eventually got handed back over to China. So basically, you have this one version of China over here, which is now Taiwan. You have China. You have Hong Kong, which is a part of China, but it's supposed to be able to run. They call it one party, two systems. It's supposed to be able to do its own thing until 2047. And you also have China on the world stage as being kind of the bad guy in the in American eyes, in the world's eyes, in this economic trade stuff, and it's all going down, sparked off by this extradition bill, but it's clearly become about something a lot more, and it's just it's weird. It is weird if you were you're this country, Hong Kong, which is part of the UK for 100 years. And I believe if you go back 100 years from 97, like Hong Kong, it was like a fishing village or something. So like modern Hong Kong is really new, and people have their own way of life and whatever, and then it gets handed over to China, and now you got China trying to influence it. And China, here's the thing, like China feels like there's what's it called? They got a word for it. Here, I'll not the Opium War, the unequal treaty. They have this concept is of China like having 100 years of just the West like fucking them up with the Opium Wars and bad deals and whatever, and people are pissed about that. And Hong Kong was one of those bad deals, so now Hong Kong's back under Chinese rule, but it's it's a different version of China than the China that had Hong Kong before. So yeah, there's just a lot of, I kind of went all over the place. Hopefully you extracted some new interesting piece of information from all that. But basically what you have going on in Hong Kong is a lot of old historical bad feelings between China and the Western world. Like Opium Wars is jacked. You have that going on one side. You also have this, democracy versus China's system of government. That battle's going on there. You have the face issue. I didn't even bring it up, but just modern, social media. If this was 20 years ago, China might have just went in and slapped everybody around and sorted it. But now you got, I can make a video about it like for no reason, people tweeting, whatever, everybody's eyes is on this. And people in Hong Kong know that they're supposed to have autonomy for at least till 2047. People know that people are watching it. People know there's this trade war going on between the US and China. So yeah, a lot of things going on worth looking up. I mean, if you pull up, I didn't read all through it, but if you pull up the history of Hong Kong on Wikipedia, I'm sure you pull all kinds of different stuff. But my main point is it's really important to look at what's going on in Hong Kong in the context of the last 100 years, as well as what's going on presently. Like it's important to look at it from the perspective of when Hong Kong was handed over from the UK to China. It's important to look at it from the perspective of when Hong Kong was given to the UK 100 plus years ago. And it is important to look at it in terms of how the Chinese political forces view the Western world and their meddlings and whatever. Yeah, just it's a lot of things. So there. Hope that's what you were looking for. I think I might go get my run in now. I'll probably make another video soon. I almost got my next 108 days figured out, but another video for another day. Alrighty, peace.